A quiet September evening in Missoula, Montana, 1986. Doug Wells steps outside, trash bag in hand. The night air carries autumn's first chill. As he turns back, a figure emerges from the shadows. The man introduces himself as Wayne Nance, a co-worker of Doug's wife, Chris. He claims he saw someone lurking outside and wanted to make sure everything was okay. Concerned, Doug invites him in to grab flashlights and check the property. But the moment they cross the threshold, Wayne strikes. A concealed metal pipe slams into Doug's skull. He collapses, blood pooling beneath him. Chris, hearing the commotion, rushes downstairs, only to find herself staring down the barrel of a pistol. Under threat, she binds her husband as Wayne forces her upstairs and restrains her to the bed. Downstairs, Doug is barely conscious, his chest pierced by a blade, his body left to die in the basement. But something inside him refuses to surrender. His fingers work against the restraints. Just within reach, his workbench, a rifle, a single bullet. Above, Wayne's footsteps creak. He thinks Doug is finished, but he's wrong. Rocky Mountains. Missoula, Montana was the picture of small-town America in the 1970s and 80s. With about 30,000 residents, it was a place where people knew their neighbors, high school sports dominated weekend conversations, and many left their doors unlocked. Crime was an afterthought. The city's economy revolved around the University of Montana, the timber industry, and railroad operations. Downtown featured historic brick buildings housing family-owned businesses. Tree-lined streets stretched into quiet residential neighborhoods. Even as the logging industry declined in the 70s, Missoula retained its community feel and low-crime reputation. But behind this sense of security, an ominous force was emerging. A local teenager, seemingly unremarkable, was harboring very dark impulses. For over a decade, he moved unseen through the community, selecting victims, slipping into homes, and taking lives, all while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. No one realized that among them, a high school student was already becoming Montana's most elusive serial killer. His first victim was already in his sights, a woman whose only mistake was knowing him through her son. Her murder in 1974 would mark the beginning of a reign of terror that lasted more than a decade, until the night it all came crashing down. Wayne Nathan Nance was born on October 18, 1955, in Clinton, Montana, a small town just east of Missoula. His parents' relationship began when his mother, Charlene, was 16 and his father, George, was 24. It set the stage for a troubled home. Wayne was the second of 4 children, growing up alongside his older sister, Desiree, and younger siblings, William and Vida. The family lived in Elmar Trailer Village in Missoula. George, a long-haul trucker, was gone for weeks at a time, leaving Charlene, a waitress battling alcoholism, to care for the children. Neglect and instability defined their upbringing. Despite this, Wayne showed early academic promise, but those who knew him saw disturbing signs. A neighbor recalled his cruelty to animals, an early warning of his later violence. His siblings also voiced concerns, but George dismissed them with a casual, "Boys will be boys." He was also physically abusive, normalizing violence in the household. By high school, Wayne had veered into darkness. He became obsessed with the occult, Satanism, and demonic rituals. boasting to friends that he planned to sacrifice someone before turning 19. He collected knives, often bringing them to school. Teachers and classmates described him as eccentric but intelligent. But intelligence masked something far more dangerous. While Wayne appeared to be a reliable worker into adulthood, beneath the surface, he was already a predator. As he approached graduation in 1974, the violent urges he'd been holding inside were about to manifest, claiming his first known victim. On April 11th, 1974, 39-year-old Donna Pounds returned to her West Riverside home after running errands. The house was quiet. Her husband, Harvey, was at work selling men's clothing. Their 20-year-old daughter was out, and their 12-year-old son was still at school. What Donna didn't know was that someone was already inside, waiting. When Harvey came home around 6 p.m., he immediately sensed something was wrong. White clothesline was tied to the four corners of each bed, blood stained the sheets, an empty gun holster lay discarded. Then, in the basement, he found her. Donna's body was beneath the stairs, a .22 caliber pistol next to her body. She'd been shot 5 times in the back of the head. The gun used belonged to Harvey, hidden in a secret compartment only someone familiar with the house would know about. 3 witnesses saw 18-year-old Wayne Nance at the Pounds home that day. One woman noticed something strange. He was carrying a black gym bag. The connection was immediate. Nance was a close friend of the Pounds' son, Kenny. He'd been inside the house before. He knew the layout. He knew where the gun was hidden. The day after the murder, Wayne branded a pentagram into his forearm with a heated coat hanger. He told friends he'd killed Donna to become a third-degree witch. They were terrified but too afraid to go to the police. Instead, they confided in their school principal. Investigators questioned Wayne and searched his home, where they found a black gym bag containing .22 caliber bullet casings matching those used to kill Donna. Despite this, authorities failed to build a strong case. Evidence was mishandled. Hair found at the scene was later lost. In June 1976, a grand jury considered charges. Wayne was flown in from San Diego, where he was in Navy training, and questioned for 7 hours. But the jury failed to reach a majority decision. Donna Pounds' murder would remain unsolved, and with no charges filed, Wayne was free to keep killing. In June 1974, just weeks after graduating from high school, and with the investigation into Donna Pounds' murder still active, Wayne Nance enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Whether he was escaping scrutiny or simply following a plan, his military career would be short-lived and troubled. During his 3 years of service, Nance racked up multiple infractions. On September 13, 1977, he was caught with marijuana. 2 weeks later, authorities found LSD, butterfly knives, stolen Navy property, and more illegal drugs in his possession. These violations led to his discharge on November 29, 1977, classified as a, quote, general discharge by reason of misconduct. Investigators later speculated that Wayne may have committed crimes while traveling during his time in the Navy, but no cases were ever definitively linked to him. After his discharge, Nance returned to Missoula and moved back in with his parents. He worked as a bouncer at the Cabin Bar, where his mother, Charlene, sometimes worked as a cocktail waitress. He briefly attended college in Seattle, but soon returned to Montana. The years between his Navy discharge and the early 1980s remain largely a mystery. What is clear is that Wayne was establishing himself as an ordinary working man while concealing the monster beneath. By 1984, he'd secured a job as a delivery driver for Conlon's Furniture, a position that gave him access to people's homes, insight into their routines, and knowledge of their layouts. That same year, women in the Missoula area began to disappear. Their remains would later be found in remote locations east of the city, victims of a killer who remained invisible. On February 27, 1980, construction workers made a grim discovery near Beavertail State Park, 26 miles east of Missoula. Against a chain-link fence near Interstate 90 lay the skeletal remains of a young woman. The body was so decomposed that identification was impossible. Investigators called her Betty Beavertail. The remains included a turtleneck sweater, a flower print dress, an earring, and a plastic bracelet. It would take 5 years before she was identified as 15-year-old Devonna Nelson, a runaway from Seattle who'd vanished in July 1978. While Wayne Nance was never definitively linked to her murder, the timing raised suspicions. He'd been in Seattle when she disappeared. In 1984, Nance was working at Conlon's Furniture store and living in a motorhome outside Milltown. That summer, he met a young woman at a truck stop. He introduced her to friends as, quote, Robin from Texas. Reportedly, she lived with him briefly before vanishing without explanation. No one thought to question her sudden disappearance. Months later, on December 24th, 1984, a wildlife photographer hiking near Deer Creek stumbled upon a decomposed leg and a partial skull protruding from the frozen ground. The victim had been shot 3 times in the head with a .22 caliber weapon. With no way to identify her, authorities named her Debbie Deer Creek. She was believed to be in her late teens or early 20s with auburn hair. Less than a year later, on September 11th, 1985, a hunter discovered another set of skeletal remains near Crystal Creek, just 3 miles from the previous site. The victim had been shot twice in the head with a .32 caliber weapon. Like the others, she remained nameless and became known only as Christy Crystal Creek. A pattern was emerging, young, vulnerable women disappearing, their bodies turning up in remote locations east of Missoula, all killed with gunshots to the head. But with no witnesses and no clear connections between the victims, law enforcement had little to go on. For decades, these women remained unidentified. Their families were left to wonder, their cases growing colder with each passing year. And Wayne Nance was still free to kill. On December 12, 1985, Michael and Teresa Shook were at home in Hamilton, Montana. Michael, 34, was a teacher at Stevensville High School. Teresa, 32, was making holiday cookies while their 4 young children played nearby. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at the door. When Michael answered, he found Wayne Nance standing outside. Days earlier, Nance had delivered furniture to their home. Now, he'd returned, but with a bizarre introduction.
I'm Conan the Barbarian.
As he pulled out a gun. Michael fought back, but the gun discharged, hitting Teresa in the leg. Nance overpowered Michael, tied him up, and locked the children in their bedroom. He took Teresa upstairs and bound her to the bed. Evidence later suggested he attacked her before taking her life with a knife. Then he returned to Michael, fatally wounding him in the chest. A neighbor later spotted a pickup truck resembling Nance's leaving the property, but hours later he came back. He ransacked the house, stealing a ceramic elk statue, a handmade hunting knife, and a collection of silver dollars. Before leaving, he set fire to the furniture, stopped the kitchen clock at midnight, knowing 4 children remained inside the smoke-filled house. The home's energy-efficient design slowed the fire, but it trapped toxic cyanide gas inside. As the smoke thickened, the children lost consciousness. The next morning, a family friend discovered the horrific scene and pulled the children to safety. The brutality of the crime shocked the community, but investigators had few leads. The case might have remained unsolved if not for what happened 9 months later in Missoula. Nance had grown bolder, escalating from isolated victims to an entire family. His next target would be a coworker he'd become obsessed with, but this time, he would choose the wrong victim. By September 1986, Wayne Nance's obsession with his coworker Chris Wells had reached a disturbing peak. As a manager at Conlon's Furniture, Chris had noticed his increasingly inappropriate behavior, drawing explicit pictures for her, overstepping boundaries. What she didn't know was that Nance had been stalking her for months, hiding in bushes, photographing her jogging route, compiling an album filled with obsessive notes. "I love you. I'm crazy about you. I want you to live with me." On the night of September 3rd, 1986, Wayne Nance's fixation turned deadly. The attack described in the opening scene of this video. After leaving Doug Wells gravely wounded in the basement, he returned upstairs to take control of the situation. But Nance had made a fatal miscalculation. Doug wasn't dead. Despite his injuries, Doug fought through the pain and worked to free himself. As a professional gunsmith, he knew his basement held a single chance at survival. He reached his workbench, found his rifle, and loaded the only bullet available. Too weak to make it up 2 flights of stairs, Doug needed a plan. He slammed the rifle butt against the wall, sending a loud, deliberate noise through the house, just enough to draw Nance's attention. It worked. Wayne stepped away from Chris, still restrained, and moved toward the basement. The moment he reached the threshold, gunfire. Doug's single shot struck him, stopping him in his tracks. But the fight wasn't over. Out of ammunition, Doug had no choice but to wield the rifle as a blunt weapon, forcing Nance back with sheer will and determination. Wounded but not giving up, Nance stumbled toward his own pistol and fired 3 times. 1 shot connected, but Doug refused to go down. Then, in a final twist of fate, Nance's gun jammed. Doug seized the moment, overpowering his attacker, and turned the weapon against him. By the time police and paramedics arrived, the attack was over. Doug and Chris Wells, though badly injured, had survived. Wayne Nance died the next day, September 4th, 1986. Doug Wells had done what no investigation, no grand jury, and no police force had been able to do. He'd stopped a predator who'd terrorized western Montana for over a decade. With Wayne Nance dead, investigators worked quickly to uncover the full extent of his crimes. The first major break came from Bob Shook, the father of victim Michael Shook. After hearing about the attack on the Wells family, he contacted police with a request: search for 2 stolen items from his son's home, a ceramic elk statue and a stag-handled hunting knife, both handcrafted by Teresa Shook's sisters. When officers searched Nance's home, they found both. The elk statue had been given to Nance's father as a Christmas gift, while the knife remained in his possession. This was undeniable proof linking Nance to the Shook murders. More disturbing discoveries followed. A photo album filled with surveillance-style photographs of Chris Wells surfaced. Images taken from hiding spots along her jogging route, captioned with handwritten notes professing obsession. Then came the most damning piece of evidence. A single strand of hair, later confirmed by DNA, belonged to Marcella Marcy Bachman, the missing teen Nance had once introduced to friends as, quote, Robin from Texas. This conclusively identified Debbie Deer Creek as one of Nance's victims. Investigators then turned back to the 1974 murder of Donna Pounds, where Nance had been questioned but never charged. Now, with fresh scrutiny, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He had a personal connection to the family, was seen leaving the property, and had been in possession of bullets matching the murder weapon. The Missoula County Sheriff's Office and the FBI began reconstructing Nance's timeline, feeding case details into national crime databases in search of unsolved murders that matched his pattern. A profile emerged. He targeted women he knew, entered homes where he was familiar with the layout, restrained his victims, and often used firearms. In multiple cases, evidence suggested a sexual component. While he was never formally charged or convicted, law enforcement ultimately linked Nance to at least 6 murders. The true number remains unknown. One final development came decades later. In May 2021, DNA analysis finally identified Christy Crystal Creek as Janet Lee Lucas, solving a mystery that had haunted investigators for nearly 40 years. But it also raised a chilling question. Was she another one of Nance's victims? Given the location of her remains and the method of her murder, the answer may never be known. The exposure of Wayne Nance's crimes shattered Missoula's sense of safety, forcing residents to confront the unsettling truth. A monster had lived among them for over a decade. For Doug and Chris Wells, recovery was long and difficult, but their survival became a symbol of resilience. Strangers and neighbors alike rallied around them, sending donations from across the U.S. and Canada to help with medical expenses. Their story was no longer just about tragedy. It was about strength, survival, and fighting back. Doug's battle with Nance became the defining moment in stopping a killer no investigation, no grand jury, and no police force had been able to stop. His defiance in the face of death wasn't just survival, it was justice. For the families of Nance's victims, closure remained elusive. The Shook children grew up without their parents. The families of Donna Pounds, Devonna Nelson, Marcella Bachman, and Janet Lucas spent years, decades, wondering who'd stolen their loved ones. Forensic breakthroughs changed that. Bachman's identification in 2006 and Lucas's in 2021 proved that the past is never fully buried and that science continues to bring long-awaited answers. Genetic genealogy has revolutionized cold case investigations, offering hope that more unidentified victims may one day be named. Montana law enforcement took painful but valuable lessons from the case. Nance had slipped through the cracks, questioned in Donna Pounds' murder, linked to crime scenes but never charged. The failure to indict him in 1976 left him free to kill for another decade. His case became a cautionary tale about preserving evidence, sharing intelligence across jurisdictions, and recognizing the powers of a hidden predator before more lives are lost. Today, criminologists study Nance's case as proof that serial killers don't just thrive in urban centers. They can exist in small towns, hiding in plain sight. Sometimes the most dangerous people look just like everyone else. And yet, even after his death, questions still remain. Wayne Nance was never convicted, never sentenced. Investigators linked him to at least 6 murders, but was his trail of victims even longer? How many families still wait for answers? Forests of Montana still hold their secrets. Some will be uncovered, and others never will.